Hello everyone. I'd like to share with you my experience of visiting Myanmar in September 2015. To give you some background, the Republic of the Union of Myanmar was earlier known as Burma, which is regarded as a colonial name imposed by the British. It is bordered by Bangladesh, India, China, Laos, and Thailand, as you can see in this map. The population is 51 million according to a 2014 census. Contrary to what I thought, its capital is not Yangon, it is Naypyidaw, which is 320 kilometers north of Yangon. As you would know, Yangon was earlier called Rangoon by the British. The actual name of the country, which has been in vogue for the longest time, is Myanmar. Both Myanmar and Burma are derived from the same term, Bamar, which is the dominant ethnic group of Myanmar. Let me now give you some history background. I am skipping the prehistoric period, but there's plenty of evidence for Neolithic Age, Bronze Age, and Iron Age. From the 2nd century BCE to the 9th century Common Era, the few people who were Tibeto Burman speaking began to enter the Irrawaddy River Valley from present day Yunnan, which is in China. They were heavily influenced by India. The Pew script was based on Brahmi script. 5 walled cities have been excavated from the era, the largest being Sri Kshetra. I could not visit any of them. So, Theravada Buddhism came to Myanmar in this period, and many cultural, architectural, political concepts came from India. This region was a part of the overland trade route between China and India. That is why you see so much of influence from both the giants. The Pew stupa designs were heavily influenced by Andhra region in India, especially Amaravati and Nagarjuna Konda. Now, the Pews were weakened by repeated invasions from Nanchao Kingdom in Yunnan between 750 and 830 CE. Out of them came the Bamar people who founded the Pagan, also called the Bagan Empire, on the banks of the Irrawaddy. The Mons, who were ruling over lower Myanmar, also came under Pagan influence, but they had their own distinctive culture. By the 12th century, the Pagan Empire and the Khmer Empire were the two major powers in Southeast Asia. Pagan is the golden or the classical era of Myanmar when temple building was at its peak. But repeated Mongol invasions weakened the Pagan Empire by 14th century CE. The fragmentation continued for 250 years. New players such as the Ava Kingdom and Hantawadi Kingdom emerged. Some of them were breakaways from the old empire. And in the western part of Myanmar, portions of today's Bangladesh and Arakan region were taken over by the kingdom of Murok-U in the 15th century. Several states were ruled by the Shan people who had come with Mongols. There was a brief period of reunification under Tongu dynasty when a large part of the territory that we know today as Myanmar came together, but the glory of Pagan Empire could not be regained. Borders kept changing between different kingdoms, sometimes bringing Assam, sometimes Manipur and Thailand into their fold. There was a great deal of Thai Myanmar rivalry. In the beginning, the Burmese were able to subjugate the Thais and steal the riches, but the Thais were able to regain their territory. In the midst of all the fighting between the different kingdoms, the British stepped in, as they always did. Britain began to extend its presence in Southeast Asia in the 19th century. So, when the Ava kingdom impinged on the borders of British India, the First Anglo Burmese War started and lasted for 2 years from 1824 to 26. The Burmese were badly defeated and were asked to pay an indemnity of £1 million sterling, which they could ill afford. It is said the Burmese elite was so out of touch with reality of British might that they had no idea what they were getting into. So, two more wars, the Second and Third Anglo Burmese Wars, were fought, after which Myanmar was annexed by Britain. The final act was the capture of Mandalay, which was the center of Burmese power in 1886. The king and queen were both exiled to India. The monarchy was abolished. The Burmese aristocracy was stripped of power. It was a big blow to the Burmese identity since the king was also the head of Buddhist hierarchy in Myanmar. From 1886, Myanmar was ruled from Calcutta as a minor part of the British Empire, which was strongly resented by the people. The Myanmaris are very proud people. Now, the British could never trust the Burmese. They made sure that the police and army were largely composed of ethnic minorities who would have no qualms in curbing dissent or using harsh measures. The administrative link with India meant Indians were free to migrate into Myanmar. In fact, 53% of Yangon's population was Indian in 1931, and the people were mainly from Calcutta and Madras. The capital for agricultural expansion of the Myanmar Delta came from Indian money lenders. So, Indian finance has played an important role in Burmese economy at that time. Roads and bridges were built, malarial swarms were cleared. The Myanmar Delta became a major producer and exporter of rice. This was also the time when Christian missionaries became active amongst the hill tribes and converted the Shan, Karen, and other ethnic minorities. There was tremendous tension between the Burmese and the immigrant Chinese and Indians who dominated the economy. The Burmese felt as if the Indians and Chinese had taken control of everything. So, just like in India, a new urban Western educated elite emerged in the 20th century in Myanmar. The nationalist movement began to take shape, but it was also strongly anti Chinese and anti Indian. One interesting point is that the domination of Myanmar economy by foreign capital led to socialist ideology among all the strands of Burmese nationalism. When World War II started, Myanmar saw the emergence of Aung San. Initially, the Japanese occupation was welcomed by the Burmese and they liked their slogan, Asia for Asians. They just wanted to throw off the British rule. However, just like the people in other parts of Southeast Asia discovered, the Burmese found that the Japanese were far more exploitative and brutal than the British. So, in 1944, Aung San rose up to form the Anti Fascist People's Freedom League, and after World War II, he negotiated with the British for independence. Shortly after, he won the election for the Constituent Assembly. Everything was set for him to become the president, but Aung San was assassinated by political rivals even before the country got independence. He was a very popular leader, and there was a lot of sorrow when he died. So, Myanmar officially became independent on January 4th, 1948. It had a democracy until 1962, but eventually the military generals could not sit back and they imposed military rule in 1962 after a coup by General Ne Win. I don't think I need to give you the details of all the subsequent events. You will be familiar with the house arrest of Aung San Suu Kyi and her ultimate release. Here's a map of Myanmar showing the major towns. You can see Yangon in the south, Mandalay in the central region, and Bagan to the west of Mandalay, and all the other towns. Now, I want to read out this quote by Than Minh Tu, who is a Burmese scholar and a well known global thinker. So he said, the early ties with China were important, but it was knowledge of India that would transform Burmese civilization. Until recently, he was referring to the first century CE. Until recently, the great cities of China lay months away from central Burma, an arduous and often fatal trek on foot or by mule. The overland route to India was equally difficult. But India was also across the sea, its vibrant eastern ports a quick and simple sail away. And it was from these ports in Bengal, Orissa, and Coromandel coast that new ideas and innovations from mathematics and astronomy to notions of kingship to Buddhism itself were eagerly imported. To this day, the Burmese word for university is Tekato, a derivation of Takshila. The first thing that struck me on reaching Yangon is the unstitched cloth that has not been given up by the people of Myanmar. I hardly saw anyone wearing trousers or jeans except for tourists. They call the dhoti as longi. The women also wear longis, but the women's designs are more colorful and attractive. And over the longis, the both men and women, they wear shirts or tops. Even in the exhibition and conference I attended in Yangon, I found all the Burmese delegates wearing lunges. It is regarded as formal wear. Now I come to the major landmark in Myanmar, the Shwedagon Pagoda. According to Thank Minh Du, the Shwedagon can be seen from almost anywhere in the city, reflecting the sun by day and floodlit at night. There is perhaps no other city in the world as dominated physically and spiritually by a religious site as Rangoon is by the Shwedagon. It is a breathtaking structure which, according to many, is as grand as Taj Mahal. It is 99 meters tall and is located on a hill such that it dominates the Yangon skyline. It is the most sacred Buddhist pagoda in Myanmar and is believed to contain relics of the four previous Buddhas of the present Kalpa. The historians and archaeologists believe that the pagoda was built by the Mon people between the 6th and 10th centuries CE. But according to legend, the Shwedagon pagoda was constructed more than 2600 years ago, which, if it is true, this is the oldest Buddhist stupa in the world. I got this picture from Google because I could not click something like this. Now I'll show you some pictures I took inside Shwedagon Pagoda. You can see how grand it is. Everywhere you look, there is gold. It's just spilling with grandeur. Shraddha or reverence is an important part of Indic tradition, and I found this visible in abundance in Myanmar. Another view inside the Shwedagon. People from all over the country donate gold ornaments and gem studded jewelry to decorate the spires of the Shwedagon. Since we cannot see all of them from below, they have put up pictures of the donations in an exhibition. There are many golden idols of Buddha in various sizes inside the Shwedagon. You will be left marveling at the workmanship of the craftsmen. So I want to highlight that the temples everywhere are not just for praying, but for relaxing on a hot afternoon or for studying for exams, even for a nap, just like in India. I saw so many children studying for their exams in different temples. And I thought I'll tell you about this interesting story about the huge bell in the Shwedagon temple. So after the first Anglo-Burmese war, the British tried to take away this bell and keep it in a museum in London. But their plan flopped because this bell was very heavy, and so when the ship was transporting the bell, it sank. The heavy bell fell at the bottom of the riverbed, and it stayed there for years and years because the British had no idea how to take it out. Finally, the local Burmese came together and they came up with an innovative solution to get the bell out from the river, and now it has been reinstated in the temple. I saw Indic customs all around. At the traffic junctions, I would see ladies carrying fragrant jasmine garlands, selling them to people going by in the cars. Also, women and girls apply a paste called tanaka on their face to protect it from harsh sunlight and keep the skin beautiful, something like sandalwood paste. So, when I asked them why they don't use sandalwood paste, they said it's very expensive. So, this is a good alternative, a cheaper alternative called Tanaka paste. And the betel leaf chewing is rampant all over Myanmar. What we call pan in India, they call it kun ya. And I found that many people have betel stained teeth. This is a picture of the most important road in Yangon. It's called the Strand Road, and it has the famous Strand Hotel. Of course, not all roads look as beautiful as this. While I was being driven around Yangon, I saw many monks carrying lunch boxes. I asked the guide what they were doing, and he said all the monks were required to go around collecting alms every single day and take back the collected food to the monastery. They ate only once in a day. So I asked why food could not be cooked for them in the monastery kitchen, and he said some monasteries did that in modern times. He said there are some 500,000 monks in Myanmar and 75,000 nuns. the female monks. So I was astonished to learn that this practice of bhiksha collection is followed so rigorously, also in Thailand, I believe. So Myanmar is one of the most devout Buddhist states in the world. Buddha is said to have insisted on bhikshus and bhikshunis going out for collecting food every day, whether or not there was enough food. Even when Buddha himself returned to his father's kingdom, he went out to collect bhiksha instead of eating food cooked in the palace, which embarrassed his father immensely. So, Myanmar is preserving this tradition so dear to Buddha. What I found strange was that my guide referred to the practice as begging. So, as a Hindu, I am well aware that both bhiksha giving and taking holds immense spiritual significance. This is a Google photo because I could not click one. I also noticed that Abhisheka is a very popular custom performed by devotees in Yangon. At Shwedagon, they pour water on the Buddha and the deity behind him while making a wish. There's also custom similar to the Navagraha Puja that we have in our Hindu temples. This is what the Myanmarese script looks like. I thought it was very similar to Oriya. And now I come to the most spectacular part of my trip, which was to Bagan, also called Pagan. It is sheer poetry in bricks. I have not seen anything like this before in my life. The Bagan archaeological area is about 13 by 7 square kilometers. There are about 3,000 temples here, mostly made of bricks, all dating to the 11th or 12th century. No one can expect to visit all the temples. Even the locals have not done that. Now, many of these temples have no names, they just have a number. So, this was the first temple that I climbed. It was called the Bu Lai Thi Temple. The steps were very high and there were no rails to hold on to. So, I was carrying my heavy camera and handbag. It was quite a challenge. When I reached the top, I had a panic attack because there was no parapet railing to hold on to and the floor was sloping outwards. It was a real experience. So, this was the view I got from the top of the second temple I climbed. Hundreds of temples as far as the eye can see. It was unforgettable. This is the Dhammayanji temple. It is the largest one in Bagan. I saw it from many places. Another mind boggling spectacular view. This is the Gauda Palin temple. I have a feeling it is a distortion of Gauda, which was a kingdom in ancient Bengal. Here is another bird's eye view. This is the sunset over the Irrawaddy River. Bagan is situated on the banks of the Irrawaddy River. Apparently, this is a variation of the Sanskrit Iravati. So, actually, it should be called the Iravati River. This is the Shwezigon temple. In the midst of so many brick stupas, this was the only one made of stone, though it shines like gold. This is supposed to be a replica of the Mahabodhi temple in Bodh Gaya, India. Its construction was begun by King Anavrata and was completed in 1102 CE during the reign of King Kansita of the Pagan dynasty. Now, if you have a bit of Sanskrit knowledge, you will quickly realize that King Anavrata is actually King Aniruddha and King Kansita is actually Gyansiddha. The locals were probably not able to say Gyansiddha and so they called it Kansida. Anavrata is one of the most famous kings in Burmese history. This pagoda is believed to enshrine a bone and a tooth of Gautama Buddha, but of course that cannot be found out for sure because you cannot see it. Another view of the Shwezigon temple. This was some temple which had only a number and no name. I found it so compelling that I asked the driver to stop and I went out to take some pictures. This is a close up of the same temple. To me, it looked very familiar because I grew up in Bengal. And later on, I came to know that Pala art from Bengal had a huge influence on Bagan. Some historians believe that Pala artisans might not have traveled all the way to Bagan. Perhaps the Pala art on palm leaf manuscripts and paintings on cloth came to Myanmar via traders and inspired all this architecture. This is the Kubyokji temple, the Tilo Minlo temple. The greenery all around the temple adds to the appeal. Look at the rich and intricate work. Here you can see the exposed bricks where the stucco covering has come off. I must mention that Bagan has suffered hundreds of earthquakes in the past and many temples were destroyed. The main ones were rebuilt by kings and recently by the military government in the 90s. The government has come in for a great deal of criticism for the shoddy job of restoration of archaeological sites that it's doing. Here you can see the terrible contrast between the new sculpture and the original construction. I actually came across the old sculptures which had been cast aside and kept somewhere in the premises. Wherever you go, you find Buddhas, sometimes a row of them, or a single one standing tall, or a single one sitting. Some are lean, some are plump. This particular Buddha had a smile which became more pronounced on moving away from it, like magic, according to the guide. But of course, it was just a play of optics. This is the only Hindu temple in Bagan. It is dedicated to Vishnu. It's a peculiar depiction because it shows Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva emerging from the navel of a reclining Vishnu. Apparently, this kind of depiction is only found here and in some temples in lower Myanmar. Here's a closer look at the sculpture. It seems to me that the top portion is restored. It seems to be of a different color and looks newer than the bottom portion. This is a fascinating stone carving of Brahma in the Nanpaya temple. There were eight such Brahma carvings in the same temple. Some of the Brahmas have gaping holes in their stomachs because of marauding robbers who thought they were jewels inside the hidden inside the stomach. So many of the stomachs have been ripped open in the other portions of the temple, but this was an intact one. More carvings from the Brahma temple. One of the pillars in the same Brahma temple. Here's a picture of the Irrawaddy River. I went for a boat ride on it. Sunset on the Irrawaddy. My guide wanted to show me more temples, but I decided to visit one of the nearby villages called Min Than Tu village. On the way, I got very excited when I saw this bullock cart and stopped to take a picture. This is one of the houses I saw in the village. You can see the raised surface on which they have built. Perhaps they wanted to avoid snakes or flooding. I was told that this is the bathroom where people had a bath. There is water inside the cylindrical structure, and the water is collected from a nearby pond. Another house in the same village. Mostly they use bamboo and straw to construct their houses. Here's a lady crafting some souvenirs. You can see the Tanaka paste on her face. The lower parts of the houses were being used for storage. This is the kitchen in one of the houses I got into. People were so kind. I could see that the people took good care of their cattle. They made nice sheds for them. It was a hot, sunny day when I went, but all the cows were nicely in the shade. This is a pond from where the village gets its water for washing, not for drinking. This is a 12th century structure, and so they have been using it from such a long time with proper maintenance. A fine example of rainwater harvesting. You can see from the steps approaching the pond that this is a very old structure. And now back to Yangon. This is the conference and exhibition I attended. Notice how all the officers from the government are wearing laundries as uniforms. They're all of the same color. And the women officers had their own laundry uniforms. On the last evening of my stay, I came to know that I was just 15 minutes away from the house where Subhash Chandra Bose stayed when he came on a secret visit to Myanmar. This house was owned by a rich Indian man called Dinanath. I think his descendants still own the house. So on the upper floor, the Dinanath gave an office room to General Aung San. So it is in this house that Netaji and General Aung San made plans to gain independence for both India and Burma. Now it has been converted into a fine dining restaurant. There's lovely atmosphere inside. The lighting was dim, so I could not get good pictures, but it was a surreal experience to imagine Netaji here in complete secrecy, strategizing on how to liberate India from British rule. And now for some final observations. Myanmar is a land deeply rooted in Indic Sanskritic traditions. However, not everyone makes the ancient connections with India. They know the modern connections with India during the British times, but they are not so familiar with the ancient connections. Myanmar is not a part of Commonwealth. I also noticed that most male children go through an initiation similar to the Upanayanam ceremony among the Hindus. So they shave their heads, but most of them do not go on to become monks. It's largely symbolic. The cruel end to monarchy has cut off the connections with many Hindu rituals. So if you see Thailand and Cambodia, the coronation of the king involves much Sanskrit chanting, which is acknowledged as Indian. But that has not happened in Myanmar. There is also a lot of resentment against the Rohingya Muslims by the locals, but I saw Muslims moving freely and there were many mosques. There's a deep sense of the need to donate to temples, to give away jewelry, riches. So people have this innate sense of frugality, but they want to make their temples look rich and beautiful. There's immense pride in the educated of Myanmar. There's also humility, especially among the poor. So, general elections were held in November 2015, and Aung San Suu Kyi won a resounding majority in both the houses. So, Myanmar is now writing a new chapter in history. With this, I come to the end of my presentation. Thank you for sharing my journey.